Hey everyone, welcome to episode 33 of the Ceres podcast. In this episode, I visit and talk to Stuart Mitchell, the director of Mitchell's Potatoes. It's not every day that you get to talk to someone whose family has been involved with farming and potatoes since the 1880s. Stuart is interesting in that he has many years to look back on of the history of their family business, but also a keen eye on the future. We discuss how his ancestors packed up all their belongings, family and animals, and moved from Bathgate near Edinburgh and moved to Rugby. Mitchell's are probably one of the biggest potato merchants in the UK, but the family still pushes it along, trying to build better relationships with farmers and customers and try and source a wider variety of quality chipping potatoes. We talk about how they specialise in specifically chipping potatoes and supply from the north of East Midlands as far down to the south coast. We discuss potato varieties, long-term hedge contracts, and so many more great important topics to do with potatoes. It is interesting how some legislation could affect potatoes, but it's not really been discussed yet. So we discuss it in this podcast, and let's hear what you all think. For those of you that don't know, the Ceres podcast is brought to you by Ceres Pure Food Innovation, and to find out more, you can visit wordofceres.com, where you can learn more about our product range, read our blogs, and check out our recipe ideas. I hope you don't mind a gentle prod. If you haven't, it's worth subscribing to the Ceres podcast so you get regular updates. And if you could give us a review and a rating in Apple Podcasts, that would be really cool too. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Ready?
Let's give it a try, Steve. It's funny. I really do feel like I'm about to do a speech.
Well, you are a little bit.
Yeah.
Stuart Mitchell, welcome to the Ceres podcast.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I think it's worth clarifying right off the bat that two things. One, you are Stuart Mitchell, the director of Mitchell's Potatoes, one of the biggest potato merchants in the UK. Secondly, it's worth notifying everybody that you call me Steve, and everybody else calls me Stelios. And no, it's fine. And that goes back to the fact that we've known each other for a very long time. And that's my granddad's name, and that's what my dad used to call me. Yeah, so, yeah.
I'll do my best to call you Stan.
No, it's fine, honestly. It's really weird. I think I told you before that my brother was at an event once, and he was talking to one of my customers, and he was just saying, like, Steve this, Steve that, Steve this, Steve that. And my customer was like, can I ask you a question, George? Who the hell are you talking about? But if you walked into a room and said Steve Theo Harris, I don't think they'd even know who he was on about. But if you go to my house, my dad's house, shall I say. Yeah. But it's a pleasure to have you today, mate.
Thank you.
So give us a quick rundown of the history of Mitchell's Potatoes.
Okay, so we've been in farming for generations. So initially Scottish farmers. We started. I don't know the history going back, but it could be 300-400 years. We've been crofters or farmers, which are small farmers in Scotland. And in 1883, my ancestor Robert Mitchell did a deal with the Duke of Buccleuch, who's one of the biggest landowners in the UK. And they moved from Bathgate, which is just outside of Edinburgh, down to a place called Lawford Heath in Warwickshire. And the reason for this move was that it was similar land here to what it was in Scotland, which was like heathland. And they were doing a really good job of clearing this heathland and producing good potato crops. So I don't know what the deal was, whether it was the land was sold, swapped, granted, rented.
It's above your pay grade, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But, yeah, anyway, in 1883, a Robert Mitchell came down from Edinburgh. He actually commissioned an entire train and filled it with livestock, so sheep, pigs, cattle, all his furniture, his family, the whole shooting match, and just came down the road here to a train station in Dunchurch, which is just outside of Rugby, and from there he drove his cattle and all his worldly belongings 7 miles on foot from the train station to Lawford Heath, which is where Mitchell's started growing potatoes in England. So that's kind of where it all starts.
It's pretty much a big deal, isn't it? Like, to do that, to move your whole family, everything. Oh, and your business, your farms, everything.
Exactly. So there must have been a deal somewhere there.
Oh, of course, it was
between him and this Duke. But
I'm sure he was an enterprising fellow to just get,
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that in our family. And so, so he got set up, started growing potatoes, seemed to do quite well. We've just launched a new website, and on there's a photo of him with my grandfather, and he would be my great-great-grandfather. Wow. And we've got a photo of him in like 1905 standing in a potato field. So
not to make light jokes or anything, but there is a joke there, because I couldn't even find a photo of you on Facebook. Yeah, there's photos of your great-great-granddad.
I wouldn't want to be,
So, like, do you feel that, there's a lot of, like, history there? Like, is that really weird? Like, does that affect you day to day, or is it more of a long-term vision?
No, you don't. I guess you don't want to let yourself down, do you?
Yeah.
And you don't want to let down, what's come before you. So it gives you an extra push each day when you don't feel like getting out of bed on a wet October morning or November morning.
Yeah, it's probably always worse for that lot, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, things are a lot easier for all of us now, aren't they?
And that farm, is that still in the family?
And, funnily enough, it's still in the family, but it's not in our part of the family. So it's owned by Andrew Mitchell. And he still grows potatoes for us, so fish and chip shops all over the country will get spuds from Andrew Mitchell. But he is Dad's cousin, so second cousin, once removed kind of relationship with me. So it is still in the family, but not in.
Yeah, Well, yeah, if you were Cypriot, mate, that'd be like, it's nothing.
Brother,
that's just brother. Yeah, exactly. Well, very close relations. Well, and the funny thing is, talking of names, like I always joke about this, but like me and my brother always say that when we were growing up, we actually thought your dad, who used to deliver potatoes to us, was Greek, because the word Mitchell, my mum used to say, or Mitros, so we used to think it was just Greek name. So then when I found out that he was English, Scottish, I had no idea. So it's just that, but again, I suppose you've been, as far, well, your dad, especially been dealing with your dad for what? 20, 30 years.
I mean, we've got customers, Steve, we've been dealing with, for 50, 60 years, third generation. Which is good.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, which we really enjoy the fact that we've been able to do that. We've been able to keep someone happy.
Yeah.
Or a family happy.
Well, easy now, like keeping it in.
Maybe they haven't been happy. Maybe they just felt some strange sense of loyalty.
Yeah, I was going to say, take it easy, mate. You're a bit romantic there.
So, if your dad, for example, I'm sure I've upset him once or twice.
I don't think I could even keep him happy. So then, if the notable people timeline even. So it's Robert Mitchell, David Mitchell, Robert Mitchell, and then it was David and Robert Mitchell, who are twins.
Yeah.
And then that's where the sort of family forks off a little bit.
Yeah, so this is the problem with farming, isn't it? And so the farms get split up because they have so many children and they have to keep splitting them down, etc. But there's a weird thing that's been going on for hundreds of years in the Mitchell family where it goes Robert, then his son's David, and then his son's Robert, and so it's every other generation. So we've got to my father and his twin brother Robert, and that's where it started to split. Dad really built the potato business up from the 60s onwards.
Yeah.
Even though we were potatoes and farming, it was we had a lorry and we'd be delivering directly to fish and chip shops and supermarkets locally. There weren't any central distribution centres and stuff back then. But Dad really pushed the potato side on. Robert pushed the farming side on as well. So the farming side grew. They took on more farms. So both of them were, quite entrepreneurial. And then in about 2000, when I was 20, my brothers were growing up. Robert, his son Robert, was growing up, so he'd broken the mould as well. He should have been called David. It split. And so potatoes sits on its own. The farming sits on its own, and here we are now. Dad's Dad's now in his 70s, so
Still working, no doubt.
He's still working like an absolute maniac.
I thought he should have retired 15 years ago, to be honest.
He just doesn't want to. I mean, he's not in the firing line so much now, but he's still he gets up at 4 a.m. and
I was going to say, in some ways, it's that whole. He's probably, although he was a potato merchant essentially, like he was a farmer through and through. Like,
So he had that hard work farming mentality. Yeah.
Well, we mentioned it earlier, just briefly, like my mate James Morley. You know, although he's not a farmer anymore, your brain still sort of works that way. Like, you know, he's in haulage now, but you still, your body clock is almost like programmed into that farming, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think it was just, when they were young lads, it was just drilled into them that you have to work extremely hard to succeed.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a generational thing.
Is that why many farmers are quite successful, do you think? Because they keep plugging away at some...
Well, I think some of them plug away mindlessly, and then others are successful. I think it's down to the individual, isn't it? But if you look at your folks, your dad's worked pretty hard all his life, hasn't he?
Yeah, grafter.
Exactly, and I think that was the generation that was.
The problem is, to some degree, is that you almost feel... Well, I almost feel like lazy in comparison. Yeah, like...
I know exactly what you feel like you're letting yourself
down. It's a different type of work, but I just feel like...
I get to work at 8 and he's been there for 4 hours doing something. Doing what? I don't know.
God knows what I'm doing.
But he's been doing something. But
my brother George will always say, oh, Dad's been up since 5 a.m, but he's had 4 cigarettes, he's been on the toilet, he's read the paper, but he'll say he's working. No, but I think that there's something about that generation behind us that they sort of work hard, tirelessly.
Yeah. I mean, they do, and I definitely don't work as hard as Dad, but I like to think I focus and I work.
Well, you work differently hard as well, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
He probably looks at you on the computer and thinks, "Ugh."
What the hell is he? It's exactly what he does. Opens the door and walks off again. Doesn't even say good morning.
Yeah, you've got your head buried in this spreadsheet, and he's just like, "Oh, that's not real work." Like,
No, exactly. But at the same time, he was pretty good at letting go, which can't have been easy for him.
I suppose in some ways, though, he probably got to do more of what he enjoyed.
Well, he only enjoys one thing, Stephen, that's working.
Fair enough.
But I think he's still found stuff to do.
Yeah.
So, there's always something to do.
And then today, obviously, there's you, Angus, David Jr.
Yeah.
No bosses as such, but you're all sort of bosses, but you're all directors.
We try and, look, we all work together on, Angus sort of heads up sales while David does the buying, but we've got we let units on the site, so David tries to manage that as well.
And not to forget that you've got a sister that's not involved in this business.
Two sisters.
Two sisters. Okay.
So everyone's kind of got a role to do on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis, and then when big decisions come in, we all sit down and we try and work things out together.
So, you've been in charge, 18, 19... Well, not in charge, but the brothers have all been involved since, 18 years, 19 years?
Yeah, exactly.
I left school in 2000, so...
Yeah, around then, exactly.
How many people do you employ now? Vehicles, depots, all that?
The business it keeps changing. So at the moment, we've got probably about 80 staff. In 2006, we probably had more than 80 staff. Back in 2000... So initially, it wasn't just fish and chip shops. We were supplying... supermarket chains, Co-op, Safeway used to exist. Who else? Lidl, Booker's Cash and Carry we used to do a lot with. We still do a lot with them, but just on the chipping side. So we were packing table potatoes.
Okay.
So baking, mids, blah. And we found it really hard to make headway with that. And then we're doing the chip shops on the other side.
Because do you think the product range was too general?
Yeah, it was also a lot of production involved, and we weren't huge players in that market. So there were bigger people who could come in and try and undercut our position to gain the Co-op business or Booker business. And so we'd then have to match that pricing, and then...
A lot of effort for not a lot.
We'd make a loss. So I think in 2006 we decided we had all these warehouses, packing spuds. It wasn't really doing anything for us. In fact, it wasn't. Business was not easy. When we arrived 5-6 years ago, I know everyone thinks we make loads of money all the time, but we really don't.
We'll get onto that.
So it was it was quite a tricky time for the first 5 or 6 years when we were working there. We weren't just packing spuds; we were making paper sacks, and we had a prepared produce factory, and it was just too much going on. anyway, so the first thing to go was the prep produce factory, then the paper sack factory. We sold that, and then finally, and then so we tried to concentrate on two things: fish and chips and packing table potatoes for the supermarkets. Couldn't make money on the table potatoes, and we had these buildings standing there, which weren't bringing any income in. So we decided to sell off the packing side of the business, let the buildings out, which brought an income in.
Nice.
So immediate uplift, and then we concentrated on fish and chips. But we really had to concentrate on fish and chips because our volumes had halved. Obviously, we laid staff off, vehicles and stuff. But on concentrating on fish and chips, our turnover is now much larger than it was when the two were combined. So it was, in hindsight, the right move.
Oh, definitely. And, I suppose on paper, supplying supermarkets looks great. But now...
Yeah, it does, a bit of kudos.
But now we also know, that... Well, I think, you see over the years, that actually supplying supermarkets in some respects just doesn't work. And, better off leaving somebody else to do that, and you can go niche. And I think...
I think that's what we did,
It's better to be known to be doing something niche, isn't it?
No, I think so. Yeah, well, it worked for us because we really concentrated on new varieties and how we could be better than the competition and building up relationships with the right growers and the right customers
So what areas do you cover now? Because years ago it was just Midlands, wasn't it? Yeah.
When we first met, Steve, it was just the Midlands. We've got national accounts now. Yeah. We don't just do them us. We use third-party suppliers to help us out. We can do most of the country, but we can't do all of it. Yeah. But really, in terms of regions, we supply East Midlands, West Midlands, the South East, the South, anywhere south really of, let's say, Stoke-on-Trent or Mansfield, anywhere in England, anywhere south of that, apart from the wilds of Norfolk and Suffolk. We do all the way along the south coast. We do South Wales, the southwest, Devon. Yeah, if you go on our website and type your postcode in, you'll see if we can supply you.
Yeah, I think you definitely supply my postcode. Yeah, so this growth. Do you think when you started doing it, do you think people probably thought, "Oh, you're a bit crazy"? Because before that, it was all very local. Everyone had their local potato guy, and you guys were probably the first to sort of grow that model.
Well, yeah, I think that it kind of happened in 2008. We had a big local, two local competitors, Newton's and Goff's potatoes, and we happened to buy both companies out within 6 weeks of each other.
Oh, really? Wow.
We shouldn't have done that. We should have done one then the other and given ourselves time to adapt.
Yeah.
And that gave us automatic growth, and that was great. But then you have to maintain that, and not every customer, just because he'd been dealing with Goffs and Mitchell's and given Mr. Goff some money, they didn't mean they had to go and deal with Mitchell's potatoes.
Some people like to not follow the trend.
No, exactly. Yeah. But I think we held on to 80% of the customer base. And I've built really good relationships with a lot of the guys who used to buy off Goff, and some of his staff still work for us now. Actually, yes, they do. And so that made a big difference. But that was still regional. And then in 2009, we were looking at an area where we could sort of grow the business and have a new depot and outside of the Midlands. And so we looked at the southwest of England because it was quite far away from growing regions. And so therefore, we were closer to the growing regions than the competition would be, so we should have an economic advantage against them. So we opened a depot down in 2009, just outside of Bristol, and we went pretty much hell for leather down there. And it took about, within 2 or 3 years, well, let's say now, it's 10 years on, it's 20% of our business, 25%. So it was a good move. And we picked up a lot of good customers. It's a good fish and chip area, like the West Midlands and the East Midlands. The East Midlands is a great fish and chip area. And then from there we looked at, so we could do that there, so why can't we do London? Why can't we do here? And if you introduce something new, people like to try something new. If you open a new fish and chip shop, they definitely want to have a look, don't they? And they want to test you. So if you do it right and your pricing is right and your quality is consistent, then it should stick, and it has. So it has worked for us, but it's hard because we can't give that personal touch, like you say, local. We can't be. I don't know every single customer.
See, from my point of
we deal
view,
with. I used to.
Well, I suppose in some ways, looking at your business model, is that if you've got a consistent product that's well priced, and I know that fluctuates obviously, but providing it's consistent, I would be pretty happy not to see someone all the time and just talk to them once a week on the phone quickly, how's it going? But I guess how many others wouldn't.
No, so each individual's different, but there's quite a few of our customers I haven't met or spoken to before, and in the past...
You'd know them all.
I'd know them all.
Yeah. You'd know such and such in Nuneaton and such in Rugby. But now you just can't know that.
But we've got some great guys in the office who build up relationships. They've been in fish and chips or in potatoes in one way or the other. And so hopefully they know what they're talking about. And we try and keep the service right. So we are going to cock up. Potatoes aren't, 52 weeks of the year, there's no way I'm going to get that right. No. Ask your dad, he will tell you.
It's not the answer we're looking for.
No, he's one extreme.
Yeah.
But when we do make a mistake, we try and
correct it.
Yeah, as quickly as possible. So, we'd like to be there and get things fixed quickly.
So whereabouts are you with the depots? So you've got Somerset Rugby. Well, Rugby's obviously main.
So Rugby is the main hub, and everything that generally goes through Rugby to go through to other depots. So up until a year ago, we had 3 other depots. We had one in Watford, and most people probably don't know the one in Watford.
I did not know about that, yeah.
They may not know that we had it, and B, they probably don't know we've closed it.
Okay.
And then we have one in Thornbury outside, which is our Bristol depot, our Southwest depot, and then we have another one down in Ilminster, which is outside of Taunton. This was a business we took on 3 years ago now, a business called Rayland's Potatoes, and that does the South Coast. Yeah, but the Watford one we closed. The reason for closing it last year, and I'm sure all the fish and chip shop owners, restaurant, we saw a decline in the amount of potatoes that were being used. And now that's probably in relation to higher pricing last year. And in addition to higher pricing, I think less, and that's higher potato prices. You had fish and chip owners had costs going up across the board, didn't they? So they increased their prices, and so their footfall dropped.
Yeah. But
because they increased their prices, they maintained their margin, but their volume in potato purchases dropped. I mean, we've seen a 10% drop, even though the amount of customers we have has actually increased slightly. Hence we had to make some cuts. So we closed the Watford depot, and everything's done from Rugby now.
Yeah. So you just have to think ahead a little bit more for those deliveries.
You do. We do overnight. We've got basically an overnight lorry that goes out. It's called a 26-ton lorry, which carries 15 tons of potatoes on the back. And the driver goes out, he delivers half the load on the Monday, sleeps out overnight somewhere on the south coast, maybe overlooking the sea, and then next morning gets up, carries on, finishes the run, back to Rugby, reload, bang, night out again. So just like you say, it just takes a little bit more prep time. And
anyone that listens to this knows that we don't really follow a linear fashion. Yeah. So you've sort of hit on the quality and the prices. So last year, it was very dry, very poor potatoes.
Yeah.
Prices went through the roof. Well, what was the difference? I think anywhere from like 6 quid to like 18, 19, I think.
No, I don't think it was that extreme. I think last year they never really, let's say a season starts in July and goes through to the following June. So that's July 18 to June 19. Prices never really dropped below about £9 last year, possibly. So and then they sort of maintained above 10 for most of the time. I haven't worked the average out last year, but I would say it was probably, I should have, but £12-13 somewhere around there
as an average.
As an average, look, sure, you're going to find something that's cheaper that's not the same spec, but for best stuff, I'd say that was the region. It got up to sort of £15-16 towards the end of the season. That was a result of the super dry 76 style summer we had last year when the Football World Cup was on.
Yeah.
Potatoes need water.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a lot.
Well, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we, about irrigation? You know, we were saying that it's not as easy just to say every field should have irrigation because there's so many factors involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about 48% or is it 50? It's 52% of the UK crop is irrigated. Now, certain areas haven't invested in irrigation, building reservoirs, putting pipe networks under the ground near rivers, because they're naturally wet areas, like the northwest of England. Grow loads of spuds in Cheshire, Lancashire, and that basically has rain generally coming in quite consistently, coming over Ireland and the Welsh hills and breaking all over Manchester, very wet place. But last summer it was dry as can be, and they just weren't prepared for it. They didn't have any irrigation set up, and so that took, rather than yields being in the summer 15 tonne to the acre as an average, there'd be 10. So you're losing a third of the crop in that region. Shropshire, bigger growing area, more irrigation set up, but they still didn't have enough irrigation. And the problem is when it gets really hot for a long period of time, the irrigation, they have to irrigate at night, because if they're irrigating in the day,
it just evaporates.
Exactly. And any sort of over 25, 26 degrees, the potatoes stop growing as well. The plants just shut down and they just go into a bit of more of a survival mode. They're not really hot weather fans. They like sunshine. They, like anything that grows, it loves sunshine,
but not the heat.
So you had the combination of lack of rain, loads of heat, and it just...
And then the potatoes get that funny sort of double growth, don't they? Because you get that ring inside, don't you?
It's called secondary growth, and we had that last year because you had rain right at the middle of August, and they've still got 3 or 4 weeks growing time. And rather than a ring inside, is what they have is a sort of little knobble comes on the end, so they look like a 10-pin bowling skittle.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of that, and so that creates mixed fry, and people aren't happy because the chips are 80% golden, 20% light brown.
So although there wasn't a lot of quantity, what was the quality like last year?
It was poor because they need water to swell as well. So they need that really in June and July. That creates in its infancy, the plant wants water, it wants healthy conditions, so it can flourish later on. So you're putting down good fruits. And so the distinct lack of water there meant even when the rain came, it was too late. Some tubers had grown to 50 mil, and they couldn't grow anymore. They'd already died off in the field. So you need plenty of moisture. So on the flip side, this year, good growing conditions. Yeah. However, you had 2 very hot spells in Europe where temperatures hit sort of 40 degrees in Belgium and France. Poland was very dry as well. So there's, I think fish and chip shops were, they were here in September, and they were looking at prices in the range of £4 for the cheap end to £5.50 for the better stuff. And they were thinking, this is going to be a nice cheap season. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be the case.
I saw some videos the other day where the water's sort of logged everywhere as well at the moment.
Exactly. Yeah. So at this point, we've got 10% of the crop in the ground. We should have it all out. We should have had it all out a couple of weeks ago, really. And this is because it's literally just rained non-stop through the whole of October. And it's not just in England, it's in Holland, Belgium. This area is where the Europe grows spuds. It's northwest Europe. And so what happens is the tractors can't move. So you've got to have the most up-to-date equipment, which is harvesters that are called self-propelled harvesters. So they don't need a tractor to pull the harvester. It's a harvester. That's all it does. And you've got a driver, like a combine harvester, a potato harvester. They cost an absolute fortune. I'm not sure exactly what they cost, but it's up with £300,000. Wow. Yeah. So only the biggest operations have them. So the smaller operations, they literally just can't get onto the field to get the potatoes out. So, they might be looking at 50% of their crop, some of them, still in the ground. Wow. And so that, it's going to be an issue. I think they'll get them all up, but the longer the spuds are in the ground, the more chance you're going to have of them chilling down in temperature. They need to stay above 9 degrees. And then you're going to get mixed fry.
So you get lots of brown potatoes, chips.
Brown chips again, yeah. So
high sugar content.
That's it, exactly. It alters their sugar content.
So the dry matter needs to be around, 20 to 22, give or take?
Yeah, 20 to 20. Look, Accord in the summer, they're going to be about 18 and 19 when they start in July. But realistically, is what we're looking for is 20 to 22. Anything above that, you're going to have increased bruising. You'll have probably some great looking chips, but they're going to be quite dry and hard. That's your target.
So one of the common themes is that people always say, they're quick to put the prices up, but they're not quick to drop the prices. But there is a reason behind that. And one of my sort of chain customers told me that really you need 2 good years of crop for the prices to come down, because then you've got the seeds from the last year that was a good crop. Is that sort of right? Have I got it a bit mixed up a bit?
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't agree with that. I think So there was on a bad year, less potatoes grow, so less seed potatoes are available. So seed becomes expensive. So that may put some growers off. But the reality is, there's not enough to go around. Do you know what? I always find there's always enough to go around. But it's like any market.
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand, and those are holding stock probably only let out as limited amounts to keep the price where they like it. So there has been enough seed, and it really genuinely is down to weather conditions. If we hadn't had this heavy rain in October, we'd be looking at an average price this year, an average price year, not a cheap year because the growing conditions weren't perfect, but they were good. But because of this rain, we're now looking at a high price season. It's irrelevant. Just because this year's high and last year was high, next year could still be high. We don't, and especially with the weather patterns now, they've completely changed.
Yeah,
it's you've just got no idea what's going to get chucked at you weather-wise, and so we could have another high-price season next year. I'd like to think you wouldn't, for the fish and chip shop's sake, but you may well.
This sort of maybe it's just the new norm, just to get used to it.
No, because you can still have great growing conditions all the way through from March when they plant the crops, so they plant everything on time, all the way through to harvesting, and so if everything's perfect, you're going to have bumper crops, and you've got 12 months to sell your potato crop, and if you've got 5 million tonnes more than you should have in Northwest Europe, there's only one thing the price will do, and it's just hit the floor, and it will stay there.
Yeah.
But they seem to be becoming few and far between. There's a lot more expensive, what we'd call expensive seasons than cheap seasons. So.
Yeah, it seems to be that way. But I think people probably, to some degree, forget that the potato is actually a pretty natural product.
Yeah.
That, it's not... it's not genetically modified, although we don't have that sort of thing in the UK anyway. But there's not been massive advancements, or have there?
No, I don't think there has been massive advancements. I mean, there has and there hasn't. Yield-wise, yields are a lot better. I think in the 70s they probably get 12 tonnes to the acre, 10 to 12 tonnes to the acre. Now, with improving farming techniques, they're more likely to get 18 to 22 tonnes to the acre. So that's doubled.
That's impressive.
However, the amount of farmers growing potatoes in the UK
has reduced.
Yes, massively. So when I started, there was about over 10,000 growers. So that's in 2000, 2001. There's now under 2,000 growers, or just around that 2,000 grower mark, registered growers in the UK.
Wow.
But they produce more. But there's big barriers to entry, because to buy the kit we just talked about, these harvesters and stuff, costs quite a lot of money. So you're either in it or you're not.
Yeah. So they've become specialists. It's not just, I'm going to put a few potatoes down to help me out.
No, and you can't do that. It's like any industry. You've got to concentrate on what you're doing. I mean, some farmers, there are a few that aren't specialists, but it's definitely become that way, where big growers.
Yeah. So again, sort of like general mixed farming, people have probably moved away from that and become specialist in.
You still need the mixed farming because you've got to rotate crops. So a potato field, a potato crop, you try and rotate it every 4 or 5 years. So if you grew it this year in 2019, you wouldn't want to grow potatoes on that field until 2024, and that's so all the nutrients that the potato takes out of the soil build back in again. Yeah, exactly.
So then what else would they put down after that? Wheat, maize?
Yeah, so if you'd follow that with wheat, typically wheat, then you'd look at maize, which is like cattle foods, like sweet corn, sugar beet, oilseed rape. There's all sorts of things.
Because that puts stuff back into the ground.
Yes and no. Yeah, I think so. And then I think they'll try and put a lot of nitrogen and stuff like that. And when they get back round to the spuds, and when I say nitrogen, I mean some farms, they'll use cattle muck, chicken muck, and this will, once it's in the soil, it will when it does rain, it'll help hold the moisture rather than the water just draining away.
Yeah.
And so it holds the moisture in the soil. Potatoes can benefit from it and swell from it.
It's interesting, isn't it, that I don't think people quite realise the effort that goes into that.
There's a lot of preparation, and they have to keep, have to do several sprays throughout the year. I think the worst time for them is when it's hot, and they're having to, they're having to irrigate their crops, and they literally have to get up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Because their irrigator's on at night, because they don't want the water evaporation of the day, and move an irrigator from one part of the field to the other. And some of these poor guys, so if they don't have them on a contract and they have them on the free market, they're thinking, well, I'm going to benefit from this eventually because I'm going to have a nice crop in an expensive season. But if they have them on a fixed price contract, They're doing it just to make sure they hit their yield targets so they can try and make a profit. So it's the cost of the water as well. But it's definitely, there's a lot of attention goes into it. There's a lot of attention with the dry matters. Now you have to estimate the dry matter, because you kill the plant off in September, but you have to kill it off. Once you kill the plant, the dry matter then increases slightly over the sort of 3-week period. Yeah.
How do they do that? How do they kill the plant? I've never.
They treat it with chemicals now. They used to burn them off.
Yeah.
But I think that do you know what? I should know the answer to this, but I think the regulations have changed on how they can kill them off now.
Oh, right.
And the regulations keep changing. You're going to have a serious problem next year where chipping potatoes, table potatoes is not a problem because you can store those right down to 2 degrees, but chipping potatoes, you need to keep them at 9 degrees or 8 degrees and above. So the sugar levels don't change, as you said, and they don't sugar, and so they maintain their fry colours. In order to do this, we have to suppress, but at the same time they have to suppress the chits. So the potatoes go into store and they cure them. So they bring them down slowly in temperature so they become dormant. And this is October, November. And then they treat them with a thing called CPC. It's something called CPC fogging, where they fog or gas the store. And it kills, and it basically stops the sprouts from coming out until March. But then they can apply it again to keep them dormant. This has now been banned as of January this year. And so there's some other alternatives on the market, but they're definitely not as good. So farmers are looking at what they can do for next year. Are they going to store them a degree lower? Is that going to ruin the fry colours? And this is really for the back end of the season, May and June, where people are mostly using marquee and stuff, which manages to hold it. But so growers are worried about how they're going to keep spuds in a good condition for that end of the year. And if they can't, then the fish and chip market, or the fresh cut chip market, is going to have to look abroad in May and June, and that means potatoes from Cyprus and Spain and Egypt. That's guaranteed.
Double price minimum.
Yeah, exactly. So we're keeping our eye on that. We don't know how it's going to develop. It's going to be we're going to have to suck it and see next year.
Basically, you've got to keep all options available.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But for a fish and chip shop, they obviously, you're trying to control costs. Things aren't very easy at the moment.
No, which we're going to get onto. But talking about varieties.
Yeah.
So I remember when I first sort of started in the fish and chip trade, like my dad always used to talk about King Edwards, and they sort of fell out by the wayside, and then it was Pipers. No one really talks about Maris Piper, nowhere near as much. Now we've just got varieties coming out our ears. So what sort of happened? Give us an explanation of where they all came from, what was the reasons. So I remember when people first started talking about Marquis, because they were one of the first early, new breeds that I can think of. Everyone was like, this is going to be a really big thing. And
yeah, I think we'd like to take a little bit of credit for Marquis, but we'll come back to that. Look, I think Piper is still a great potato at the right time of year. I mean, flavour-wise, it's hard to match it. But really now, only between sort of mid-August and late October do we sell a lot of Maris Piper. There are some diehards who refuse to use anything else, and they'll use Piper through the season, but they're few and far between now. Loads of bruising, so you don't get a good yield.
Yeah, that's right.
Fry colours go off. And so what happened really was in 2003, Marquis, and we were involved in a company, Marquis sort of came onto McCain Frozen Foods radar, and we sampled it, and we thought, that looks amazing. And so we somehow got our hands on some seed, and the seed company that was producing them.
I met that guy. You brought him to our shop once, the agronomist. He was working for Marquis. It was definitely through you. I wouldn't have met him otherwise.
Yeah, so that would have been the agronomist.
Yeah.
And I can't. And so there was a guy called Russ. He was like one of the directors as opposed to the agronomist. And anyway, we managed to get some Marquis seeds. So we got it. So we started growing it in Warwickshire. But at the same time, these seed house was obviously in business. They started getting it into big growers in Cambridgeshire as well. Everyone initially just jumped all over it.
Okay.
Because it was really good peeling yield, great fry colours.
Just a little bit dry on the cook side.
And this was the problem. So after the euphoria of thinking, what a wonderful potato this is, all our problems are answered. Yeah. It was dry, a little bit tasteless. I think it took a while. It still opened it up for all these other varieties that have come in now, like Agria, Ramos. Ramos is another one we kind of introduced. We spotted that over in Belgium. Sagita, Challenger. So there are other varieties now that people prefer. And so, but going back to Marquis, if it's grown correctly, is still a great product, but what they really have to watch is the dry matter. But if they get the dry matter right, it's, farmers love growing it, creates a good yield. The shops get a good yield. It's not idiot proof, but it's very easy to use. Peeling yield, fry colours. You've just got to not leave it perhaps too long once cooked, otherwise it like you said, it goes too dry. But I still think it's a great spud. It's a lot of marquees grown. It depends on the time of year. You've got so for us, we try and make sure we'd like to stock everything that's available at every time of year. So at the moment we have Challenger, Agria, Ramos, Maris Piper, every single chipping variety that's available. But we try and make sure we have enough grown by the right grower at the right time. So we're Ramos heavy at the moment, for example. Okay. April, May, June, we're Marquee heavy. We always have Agria through most of the season. We're buying a lot of Challenger. We're Caesar and Piper heavy in September. In August, we like lots of Miranda and Arcade. We like to have a lot of that. So we try and make sure we have a majority of something which we think is good.
Yeah. You want to be pushing out the most consistent product at the best time of the year.
Yeah, for that variety. Yeah. I mean, Ramos for me is probably your best option. Agria sometimes is a bit too expensive and a bit too yellow for people.
I don't mind the yellow. I quite like that.
Yeah, but it's a very deep yellow.
Oh, is it? All right.
And then I think sometimes it plays with your oils.
Okay, because of the sugar content.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember going to a shop a few years ago when I first started Ceres, and I remember a guy goes, "Oh, I'm not buying off a merchant. They're rip-off merchants." I was like, "All right, yeah." And he goes, "I bought Wilgers from the farmer," and I was like, "Yeah, they're quite, ain't they like for roasting?" And he's like, "No, they're great." He goes, "Look at them," and he opens a chip box. They were just like, I'm sure they were very tasty because they were sweet, but they were just so brown. And I think,
what's he doing to it? So he's doing the wrong thing, isn't he?
Well, yeah, but he thinks he's doing the right thing, but he's doing the wrong thing. Yeah. I always say to people that the way to save money is to make more money. Yeah. So
I agree with you. Always buy the best, and we give people options, and they still want to go for the cheaper options. So but if they're buying 50 bags a week,
but they take an extra,
they could save £50. But you're right. If you buy the right stuff, you should take an extra £200 or £300.
Well, I think the argument is if they need a lot more work. So if they're in the peeler for another 1 minute per bag, it all adds up, doesn't it? You're paying the spud person. I was going to say spud guy, but
you're getting less chips for what you've bought.
Exactly.
I completely agree with you.
You're using more water, and water's measured nowadays, like it used to be, where it was like just leave it on all day, nobody cared. So I think that. Really, they're better off just saying, look, give me the best product you can give me, the least amount of work, the best amount of flavour. Yeah. I suppose it makes your job easier.
Don't overcharge me.
And that's always good. That's the prerequisite, isn't it? That's the thing that gets said without being said. So again, farmers, potatoes aren't organic, but I guess, again, like anything, there's a cost to putting this stuff down. So there isn't a lot of chemicals being put down over potatoes, is there?
No. This is European Union more than anything else. They're becoming more restrictive on, certain chemicals and how many parts per million of this and that you can have on them. Really, you need a potato farmer to answer this for you because they'll give you more definitive answers. But each year you are having what was probably described as a healthier potato turn up at your site, fish and chip shop, restaurant, whatever it may be. Yeah, it's definitely changing.
Regarding pre-packed potatoes, let's jump onto that a little bit. Do you see that being a big thing moving forward? Because I think I've seen that. I think a lot of people talk about how big it is today. I don't think it's that big, but how old am I? 35, 15 years ago, that's where it probably started, really. You were doing it at the time. There was James Morley doing it locally. I'm just thinking locally. I'm sure there was others around the country, but I'm thinking where I was at that time. And I don't think it's massive now, but a lot of people seem to be talking really highly of it. I'm not a huge proponent of that product. I don't think for me, they're not the best chips, if I'm honest. They're okay. They've done better over the years, but I still think that for me, buying them in a muddy state, in a paper bag and putting them through a rumbler and chipping them as I need them, I feel that that's going to be a much better product.
I agree with you, Steve. I think that they serve a purpose. So if you've got, if you're not selling a lot of chips a week and you can just go to the fridge and open a 10 kilo pack, that's great. That works for you. You don't have the cost of the peeler, the chipper, chap peeling the potatoes for you. But they're not cheap either. If you look at, problem is that potatoes are delivered to you on ambient vehicles. They're stored in ambient warehouses. So when it comes to chips, once they've been turned from a potato into a chip, which there's obviously a production cost that goes into that, then they've got 5 days shelf life. But really, you want them to be as fresh as possible, so you're going to want them 2 or 3 times a week. They've then got to be delivered from a chilled warehouse on a chilled vehicle, so there's more cost in both of those things. Payload on a chilled vehicle is much less because
I've got the fridge.
Yeah, you've got the fridge, the weight of the fridge, all the fiberglass insulation. So rather than, let's say if we had an 18-ton vehicle, we'd almost get 11 ton of potatoes on there. That would probably get 9 ton of chips on. But it's physically impossible to deliver 9 ton of chips in a day because no one uses a pallet of chips. And so you
got
break
more
it,
drops.
So you make it down into smaller vehicles, more drops. So the cost is almost, for delivering chips, is double. And that cost is passed on
to the consumer.
To the consumer. And then you've got to consider, right, I've ordered some chips to be delivered to me on Tuesday. Chances are they were produced on Sunday, Monday at best.
If you're lucky.
Delivered to you on Tuesday. You're using a bit of old stock. You might be using those Tuesday evening, and then you're using on Wednesday morning. So they could be three days old before you've used them. There's no way that's going to be able to match up to a freshly cut potato that's been treated that day. Having said that, Triple F do a good job, and for the people who want to use fresh cut chips, I think they've been really consistent. We stock their product. Yeah, they are the most consistent fresh cut chip product I've seen. But if it was my choice, I'd be doing fresh everything.
I think a friend of mine always says, like, he sort of says, like, with pre-packed chips, is that they're probably going to be as good as your fresh chips done on a bad day. Like, maybe that's probably quite extreme, but
or a day old.
Or a day old, yeah. Because I think that there's something about, like, and I've seen some people get them on day 4. They'll get Triple F from, which is obviously where are they filed?
Yeah.
And they're in Bognor, like, so they're not getting it. They're getting it on day 3, day 4, which gives them such a small window.
Well, hopefully it's not as bad as that, but they're certainly going to get them on day 3, guaranteed, aren't they? By the time
I think the problem is that I think from a technical point of view, and someone at Triple F would be able to answer this, like, you do lose water out of a chip that's just been chipped in a vacuum pack, hence why you get the water build up, and that water comes out of the structure of the chip. And I think that will give you a worse cooked chip, personally.
True. I think Triple F have perfected it still.
Okay.
And I think, and in fairness to them, with us, this is, so I don't know how other people are. They produce for us on Sunday morning. They come on Sunday night overnight.
Okay, that's so they've really
So what we do is fresh, but with other operators and stuff, I don't know what the scenario is.
No, it's good. It's good that you've used your sort of your position to try to drill down that better quality, even in that respect, because to some people it'd just be like a side thought.
Well, I mean, it's still a very small percentage of our sales. It's about 2%. That goes to show you how much it's taking on.
Yeah.
It's been around now for
15 years, give or take,
You're going to get a better product and a cheaper product with raw potatoes, basically. However...
But we were talking about Five Guys, weren't we? Like, if you look at Five Guys, and they do all fresh, and it's on site every day as they go along, and I think people resonate with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think maybe, and I do see sometimes, like, I've got friends that use pre-packed chips in Leeds, and he had a Facebook comment recently, and someone says, "Oh, I saw the delivery driver bringing in frozen chips." And when the customer just got really triggered thinking about that, and I think most chip shop customers expect it to be done on site, I think.
Well, I think you'd expect that everywhere you go, wouldn't you? So if you go to a nice restaurant, you'd hope that it would be done fresh on site. But the chances are he's got an outlet somewhere where he's prepping stuff. But hopefully that's freshly prepped on the day, and then...
Yeah, well, he's quite close to his potato guy, I can't remember, Vic Graham's. So, so he's not far.
He's another prep chip guy.
Yeah. So I think that for me, I've been to some restaurants and I've had chips. I'm like, I wish they were frozen at least, because they'd be better. Yeah. Like, because there is an art to doing great chips, like, so.
I agree. I think frozen French fries, great.
Yeah.
That works. Having said that, you're right. Five Guys works as well.
Oh, it does massively. Yeah.
But you can't. I just don't think you can use frozen chips.
No, I don't think a fish and chip business could.
No, a fish and chip, or like chunky chips. I mean, rather than French. I don't think a burger chain can do the same thing, really.
No, I think you're probably right. So one thing I wanted to ask you, just to go back a little bit, we've spoke about sort of irrigation. There isn't no form of, like, now with all the wet sort of sitting in the ground, there's no drainage systems, is there?
No, well, the farms do. They try and create drainage in fields.
Yeah.
So where the ditches are, there's some kind of drainage system put in there.
Oh, right.
But it's not.
It's not fast.
No. And you're just trying to create natural drainage. Yeah. So you'll generally find where potatoes grow, they won't grow on heavy clay. Well, I've got a farmer down the road, about 5 miles behind where we're sitting, who has grown it on heavy clay, and his entire crop is still in the ground.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so that's destined for
Failure.
your dad's plates. It's supposed to
be. He's listening to this, so I know I won't. Yeah.
So that's a worry for
Yeah.
us. He's grown some of that on a contract with us, but I'm sure we'll get it sorted one way or the other. But it'll be a worry for him. But because he grows it on heavy clay every year, I don't know if he's panicking just yet, but
He's probably just thinking it's normal.
Yeah, he's used to it. But you want free draining soils, which you have in Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire. You definitely have in Shropshire. Where they grew new potatoes, very sandy. The soil warms up quicker, but it also the water drains through very. Drainage is important.
You were sort of saying that, and if you go from the heat to a big downpour, then that creates a lot of water logging because the water can't drain through the soil fast enough.
Yeah, I think that's only when let's say it hasn't rained for 3 or 4 weeks, you can look at your lawn and it's going to solidify, and so the potato field it becomes like a road surface almost, and so if you get really heavy rain, although some of it will be absorbed, it's just going to, especially if you're on a hillside, it's just going to run down the ridges in between the potatoes plants and off the field, but any rain is welcome in dry conditions.
Yeah. So in some ways, what you sort of want is maybe like a light sprinkling the night before, if it was going to be.
Great. Or is what you really want is some nice sort of southwest. So it's coming in off the Atlantic and it just rains through the day. That's the kind of weather you're looking for, rather than sort of heavy thundery downpours, which traditionally they come up from the south, don't they? Yeah, you're looking for a steady day's rain.
Looking back on what we just spoke about, so would you say that sustainability in potato growing exists?
You'd say it's a sustainable product, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
I'd rotating the crop every 5 years, it produces. Although seed is grown separately, it can produce its own seed again to reproduce. And because it's such a sustainable crop, that's why it's such a huge thing, and that's developing from when they first brought it over from South America.
Yeah,
it's relatively cheap. Well, it was relatively cheap to grow.
Yeah.
Produces good yields and gives.
Even so, I think potato prices have probably stayed quite steady. Forget the odd, those blips that you get where you hit your 15s and your 14s. But after that, it probably settles out at your $5 mark, don't it? And it's been
no, you're miles off that.
Am I? How far off am I?
I think if you look at the average price over the last 5 years, you're going to be closer to 8.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Just under 8, I would say. And if you chuck this year in as well, I think it would probably push it over 8. I think since 2012, we've had 2 exceptionally expensive seasons. I think we've had 4 expensive ones, 1 cheap one, maybe 3 expensive ones, 1 cheap one, 1 average one. But it seems to be extremes now. It's either very expensive, but the average is higher than you'd expect.
So this brings me over to the fact that you guys essentially invented the sort of hedged potato buying, which is a contract. You've essentially hedged prices for the next year, 2 years, and you've created a contract. And when was it that you first created a contract? How long ago?
This, technically speaking, it wasn't our idea.
Okay.
It was a fish and chip shop.
Okay.
His name was Charlie Orthodox, who had Bell Lane Fish Bar in Birmingham. He wanted a fixed price from October to the end of the season. And so we would fix a price somewhere around, it was a while ago, it must be 15 years ago now. I think we fixed it at £4.50 that season.
Okay.
It was a cheap season. It ended up being a dearer season, so he benefited, and then a few more people were interested. And we thought to ourselves, well, we can offer something here that other people can't offer, or hadn't thought of offering at the time. So each year we'd approach growers and say, right, we want you to put X amount of your crop on contract. And so we'd buy so many tons on contract each week, 50 tons, 100 tons, bang, bang, and then we'd sell them to customers. And slowly but surely, as they realise there's more high-price years and low-price years, more and more people would join. And now we do probably, I don't know, 30,000 bags a week, about 30,000 bags a week on fixed pricing.
Okay.
It makes sense for the fish and chip shop. I mean, it's not $4.50 anymore. It's more like $7.50.
Yeah.
And $7.50 plus, depending on where you are in the country. It's still £7.50, and if you're selling a portion of chips at £2,
I'm probably way off there, to be honest.
Yeah, but let's say £2, and you're making £50 from £7.50. That's quite an incredible marker. And then you're fixing your costs, which is a great thing to do in our mind when you don't want too many variables. And fish and chips right now, it's not easy, is it? And you're making, when you used to make money on everything, a lot of your profit now comes from your chip sales.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with me there.
That's probably about right.
That's the feedback you get.
Yeah.
So it's proved to be quite popular. Our competition do it now. They've caught on. They've worked it out. They've done a few deals with farmers. I still like to think that ours is a more comprehensive contract with better growers, high flyers. Tony Lee, number one marquee. I think we're ahead of them in preparing it and making sure we've got the right quality at the right time of year. But it would appear that it's going to prove the sensible move to be on a contract again this year.
Yeah. And so there's obviously pros and cons. I can't think of many cons of the contract. Many would argue that there isn't a lot of choice, but you've just said, well, there is a lot of choice.
We stock so many different types of potatoes. We're definitely going to find something that suits you. Each individual likes a different type of potato for whatever reason that may be. And because we're moving such volume, we can just we've got
work through that.
Right now we've got 8 different varieties and 5 different farms on each single variety.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of choice. So we'll always find something that
Has there ever been a time where you literally just you're looking around and you're thinking there's not much quality out there?
Well, about a week ago actually. This weather has been, so the farmers, they've just been concentrating on getting this crop into their stores because it's going to be a valuable crop.
Yeah.
And so they haven't been supplying the market. So the only thing that's been going onto the market hasn't been that great. Prices have been rising because everyone's chasing around looking for stuff. So it's better now because all our contract growers have got their spuds into the store and now they've started supplying us. And so now the quality is right. But this time last week I was pulling what little hair I have left out because it was.
Was you thinking of cancelling again?
No.
So sometimes you do get, and you hear it a lot sometimes, you see it on Facebook or whatever, but you see that there's probably there's an attitude that probably that the merchants are rip-off merchants. And we've joked about this, and and you said earlier, well, we're not as rich as what people think. And you move volume, so where do you think that sort of attitude comes from, where people think that merchants are doing over the farmers? Where do you think this rhetoric comes from?
You tell me, Steve.
Well, I don't know, because for me, if you're doing contracts, you must have great relationships with farmers, because you're not paid.
I just, perhaps because this may be the mentality of the older generation of
friars,
and where I think they didn't necessarily trust their potato merchant or the farmers that they were buying off and thought that they were, trying to make a quick buck out of them. Some people may have been doing that, I don't know, but I think for us, we want you to keep coming back every week of every year until you're not in
the business anymore. Yeah,
exactly. And so we try, and it's competitive. We've got competitors everywhere, so you have to give someone a fair price for the product you're selling. And so I feel I just can't work out why there's. I think they've got in their mind that we're trying to clear stock that's no good.
Well, it's not just you guys. Just to clarify, you see it with
just,
fish merchants as well.
Exactly.
They're like, "Oh, let's just cut out the middlemen and we'll go direct." And I was just thinking, well, it's a lot of work involved. You don't realise that not just Mitchell's, but other potato guys have Arctics going out, getting spuds from all over the country, then delivering them out on other vehicles to other parts of the country, and then if it's fish merchants, they're dealing with Norway, Iceland, Faroes, and they're making all this happen for you. Yeah,
they wouldn't be there unless there was a necessity for them.
Yeah,
and you can't. A farmer in Cambridgeshire is going to be right for you at certain times of the year, but at other times of the year he's not going to have any potatoes. No. So you're going to need a farmer here and a farmer there, and that farmer that you've made a relationship with, his crop's no good this year. It's our problem to deal with that, and move someone else's crop in instead, and manage these things. There's a lot of hard work that goes into the background of keep people satisfied and selling a decent product. We sample literally everything that comes in. So every load that comes in, we peel it, and we check for so we look at mechanical damage levels, greening, bruising, growth cracks, Then we look at the size of the potato, we look at the fry colour, texture, taste.
So you don't just lift it out of the ground, put it in a bag, and then off it goes.
Off it goes,
No.
down to John's Fish Bar or wherever.
Yeah, whoever it may be.
I mean, some of the companies we've bought out along the way, I've been surprised at how little they did. But I think in order to keep people satisfied, and we don't want to have to go back and exchange potatoes. One, the customer gets
double
upset.
cost. Yeah.
Double cost. Customer's upset.
Yeah. But we're the same with batter.
Yeah.
I'd rather that it hits a spec every time rather than having to go back, have that awkward conversation, replace, and so on.
Exactly. So we try and get it right first time. And we'd like to think we're going to do that
Majority of the time.
90% of the time in a 52-week season. But each year is different. There's going to be quality issues this year with fry colour because stuff's been stuck in the ground too long.
Mm-hmm.
Size will be good. I think I think they're going to have the shops are generally going to have a good product this year. It's just how much they're paying for the good product is going to be the issue.
One thing we were talking about is that you're always innovating, and it doesn't sound like that you can innovate a lot, especially with the fact that we said that nothing really changes with a potato. But you are bringing out, or you've just brought out a new product.
Yeah, so we've just brought a new product out. We supply Booker's Cash and Carry and Macro with chipping potatoes, and we decided it needed some life.
Mm-hmm. As opposed to just being a native potato.
Exactly, and just, there's a chipping potato with soil on. So we decided, it's called Boots Farm Seriously Good Washed Chipping Potatoes. It's a 20 kilo bag as opposed to 25 that you guys will be used to. And it's really aimed at caterers, pubs, restaurants, clubs, anything, golf courses, whatever it may be. But it is predominantly a chipping potato, but it's got a nice skin finish. It's washed, so if you want to use it for mash, roasting, whatever you want to do, it's there. You have those options rather than buying dirty potatoes, having to wash them. Not everyone has a peeler and a chipper and everything else. We launched it at the start of October and it's going great guns. We're really pleased. Our sales volume's up about 30% on last year already. But these are for people who are buying 3 or 4 units a week, 5 or 6 units a week. But really for pub enterprises who want to sell a really good authentic chip, and restaurants as well, this is the perfect product.
Because they leave the skin on them because they look quite rustic.
Yeah, exactly. But if they want to peel them, they've got facilities they can do that. And the added bonus is you have less waste because you don't have the weight of the soil, you don't have to wash the soil, so there's 2 costs involved there. You're going to lose the weight and it's going to take time to wash the potatoes. Yeah, so the variety we're using at the moment is Sagita,
nice.
which we think is sort of perfect for your rustic chip. Varieties will change through the year. If you're one of those people who's using 3 or 4 bags a week and want to try something new. Yeah.
Do you ever see a market there, like delivering yourselves direct to hotels and pubs and so on, or is it just too fragmented for you?
No, we do. We do that, but only the volumes have got to be a certain level. And the problem is drivers are restricted by the amount of hours they can do each day. Delivering 400 bags of 25 kilo potatoes is pretty tough work.
I see it. It's backbreaking.
Yeah, it is, exactly. So at the moment, it's not. So I think we'd rather distribute them through third parties. But yeah, possibly at some point.
With the flour business, probably 20 years ago, they were probably double the size, 32 kilos. And no one seemed to have a problem with it until the EU says, maybe you should make this a bit lighter. But then, was that the same with potatoes at any point before your time? Were they heavier, would you say?
Yeah, they used to be twice as heavy, didn't they? So
I never saw that. So
yeah, nor did I really.
No.
Yeah, that would have been in the 60s and 70s. So they would have been in those Hessian sacks, ones you have on sports day at school. Yeah. So and that would have been, I think they were 100 weight. So so twice the weight.
So 40 kilos, give or take then?
Well,
50
almost 50 kilos. So when men were men.
Well, my dad always jokes and says, I used to live 2 of these at a time. And I was like, yeah, right, here we go. But, it's weird because, I was trying to figure this out because you said, obviously, health and safety and all that. Did people do their backs in then lifting that?
Well, I'm sure they did. I mean, we have considered, and this is something we may well be putting to people, that we want to switch down from a 25 to a 20.
Yeah.
So there'll be, no extra cost or anything.
No, but
it's just, it's easier for the fryer to handle them.
Yeah.
It's easier for the drivers to handle them. There's probably, although they're going to have to make more journeys to and from the lorry.
That's what I was going to say. I wonder if the damage is in the lifting or is it the journey?
Do you know what? Thus far, we haven't had anyone come back to us and request some compensation.
No, as long as they do it right, which your drivers...
Well, you do, but it's still a difficult product. And when the driver's out there delivering, we're not there to monitor what he's doing. I've seen the occasional video of people using a sack barrow with 20 bags of potatoes on there. That's half a ton.
That's some extreme.
That's extreme.
What's
That's
it made out of?
someone getting hurt. So, they obviously have the correct training on how to handle them, but we can't be there all the time.
So what in your, you've been in the industry just a bit longer than what I have. What do you think of what's the major differences? What's changed for you?
Potato quality is great, as we were discussing from these.
Then yields are up.
Yeah, and yields are up. From these new varieties, they're selling a more consistent product, I think, fish and chip shops. But I think what's really changed is the drop in demand, which is possibly not drop in demand, but it's units sold to fish and chip shops. Where a shop might buy 50 bags a week, 2,500 bags a year off us, they're now buying 35 bags a week. So that's quite a drop. And this has happened over the last sort of 7-8 years where we've had two sort of big drops.
Was it like a slow gradual thing, or has it been
two quite severe drops. So one sort of happened 12 months ago, 14 months ago. And then I think the time before that was sort of 2011. And it also dropped in 2007. Initially, you guys were the fryers were busier, and then it dropped off. Now, there's loads of headwinds, really, aren't there, for fish and chips? Healthier eating, the rise of the coffee shop, Greggs.
Yeah, the lunchtime trade's been decimated. Yeah.
Aging population. So the younger generation aren't so interested. Deliveries.
I think that we've got a few things we can discuss here. So if we look at, we're both fathers, we've both got young kids. If I say to my boy, and he's not some middle-class posh boy, but if I say to him, where do you want to eat? He'll always... fish and chips probably isn't at the top of the list. And I'll say to him, what do you want? He'll go, Wagamama's, so it's spicy. Yeah, they love it. Absolutely love it.
That's right. My 7-year-old daughter loves Wagamama's.
Yeah.
The other one loves McDonald's.
Yeah, Alex loves that too. Yeah.
But still, if I say... So I take
give them a choice,
They play hockey on a Friday night, and the bribe is that I'll either take them for breakfast the next morning at McDonald's, or we'll stop at the chip shop on the way home. Yeah. They still love fish and chips.
I'm sure they won't say no to it, but it just wouldn't be at the top of their list.
It's not at the top of their list. And it's probably, if you're thinking about going out somewhere nice to eat, not that, I don't think that's where fish and chips sits.
No, I don't think it's even. I think what I'm getting at more than anything when I reference Wagamama's is the flavour profiles. Yeah. So our kids of today are much more
open to
they're not. I can't remember eating anything spicy when I was younger. My dad used to get a curry for mum, and they used to both get a curry together, and we didn't see that until we was probably teenagers. So I think that now though the flavour base is
it's developing at a much younger age.
I think Alex was like, I remember we was at a family house once, and I can't remember whose it was, and someone had spicy Doritos out, and he was just munching on them, and I thought, well, I'm going to try one, and they were like, there was a little kick to them, don't get me wrong, I like spicy food, and I think if anything, in some ways, the fish and chip industry has stayed in a very safe space. Let's not really develop and do things differently, and I think maybe that's probably. Yeah. Considering all the competition, though, it's still holding its own. Massively. I think this year thing, so when we were growing up, people probably ate out, very rarely? I agree with that. Fish and chips would have been the regular thing. Now, you've got, I reckon some people probably eat out 5 nights a week. And I think so. Yeah, I'd say so, because when you factor in the 3 meal sets, you're making more money than me. Not me. I mean others, because if you think you've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I know people that buy lunch out every day. And maybe it's Greggs, maybe it's Pret a Manger. So what I mean is that 5. Right, let's rephrase that. Not 5 nights a week, 5 times a week, and that could be McDonald's at breakfast or Pret a Manger for lunch, not all on the same day, throughout the week. Well, how many of those are at a fish and chip shop now? And then you've got Just Eat, and then you've got Deliveroo, and then you've got all of these other things that factor in. Well, this is the problem. People perceive fish and chips as, although they expect fish and chips to be dirt cheap. So this is the consumer end, and obviously they're not. I've got a friend, he lives in St Albans, which is a nice town to live in. He's a city lawyer in London, and he always goes, fish and chips is expensive, and I'm putting money in your pockets. Here we go, that old chestnut, And I'm thinking, it's not, really. No. If you break it down, it's not. I can't see how it's expensive. I can see how it's more expensive than it used to be. Correct. Yeah, I get that argument. However, but I think, all right, so here's the other thing. So this is a question that I had for you, and it's, can fish and chips be too expensive? In my opinion, we are at we're at the
And
cusp part.
it's easy for me to say that as the supplier, though. I'm
Yeah.
not the man standing behind the fryer or trying to run a fish and chip restaurant. So, but I just think if we go much higher, we're going to put people off. I think now we've got to look at portions, which is detrimental to me.
Of course, that affects your business,
But it's not. If the prices are right, more people are going to come back more often.
Yeah,
you get them. People are going to come in, and so my sales should maintain.
One of our customers in Liverpool says, what you don't want people to do is say, well, from a consumer point of view, should we go for fish and chips? He goes, because it's always been off the cuff, we're going to the chippy. And that was fine. No one thought about it. There was no effort made. The minute someone says, should we go to the chippy because we're either more expensive or whatever reason it is they don't like, whatever perception they've got, then they're going to start saying, well, actually, do you fancy Chinese? Well, actually, do you fancy this? Do you fancy that? Whereas, and if you think, I still think fish and chips for what it is,
nutrition-wise, it's
nutrition-wise, it's all right. You've got the fact that done right, it's clean, good quality. I think that the portion size can be a bit big, and if they was to trim that down a bit, they could keep that a bit more sensible.
And I think that's great as well for return business, because if they enjoy the meal and they could have a little bit more, they're going to come back. And so and I think a lot of fish and chip shops, people go there and they buy. If I'm being healthy, I'll buy fish and chips once and share it with my wife.
Yeah, and I think the downside is we're not at the coalface anymore. I haven't fried properly for a long time. You're not a fryer, you're a potato supplier, and I think a lot of our customers would probably say to us, you two are out of touch, you don't get it.
Yeah.
You don't see our customers' face when they come in and they're annoyed, and they want to, especially in the Midlands. Midlands and Wales are probably the heftiest portions going, really, without slating anybody.
But I think they're getting better.
Then I think they're getting better, definitely.
But I think they've got to reduce it and keep. It's almost like trying to get people to spend £12 rather than £8.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you have smaller portions and it's £6 twice. And this is what McDonald's and all these other big corporates do so well.
Yeah.
You buy a meal for yourself, generally, don't you? Okay, KFC, not so much, but...
No, it's true. I think KFC is probably one of the old stalwarts, really, where, But again, that's incredible value, I think. It's been a while since I've been to one, but you can get a bucket for like 12, 14 quid, and that feeds quite a few people.
Yeah.
But chicken's cheap, and those prices are hedged for a really long time,
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Fish is obviously...
It's a wild
really,
product,
And it seems to be getting worse.
Massively, yeah. I think someone said to me a while ago that fish is probably going to hit £200 a case at some point, and and I think that's probably going to be really difficult for a lot of fish and chip shops. I think it's not going to be good, and but yeah.
I think to survive, everyone has to adapt, don't they? So the size of a piece of fish goes down to 8 ounce, I guess, or
you can't just give a 14-ounce fish anymore for $3.50. It's just not going to happen. People have got to be realistic, and they've got to use their profit margin calculators and figure out what the margin is, and
go with it.
And go with it, and what they're happy to sort of work for. And I think that years ago that probably wasn't a big deal. My dad would have never looked at a profit margin calculator because it just wasn't his generation. The till was always full.
Well, you open the door and then they came.
Yeah, exactly.
But they've got 20 different types of competition now.
Now you need, I'd say at the very least, you need a good social media presence. You need a good marketing plan. You need to have a good grasp of good quality food.
I agree. You've got to drag them into your premises. Haven't you?
I think we've probably been, this industry especially, has been a bit slow on the whole credit card front, I think.
I agree with that. I mean, there's still shops, we have a really good local fish and chip shop, and they don't take cards. And it's really busy anyway, so they might just get away with it.
Yeah.
But why not take cards? Why alienate them? And why not do deliveries? And if you don't want to do deliveries where you're organising it yourself, then you can use Deliveroo, I guess.
Yeah, you could do.
Or Uber Eats. And then you've got a fixed cost. You're not having to worry about it. It's still a takeaway.
Yeah.
And it increases your revenue. I've got a customer in Worcester, and he does Just Eat. He wasn't doing Just Eat, and his sales were £6,000 a week. He introduced Just Eat, and 4 weeks later, his sales are up to just under £10,000 a week. Okay, there's going to be some cost with that.
Of course.
But you're still going to be making more profit. There's just no two ways about it. Yeah. I think unfortunately, you can't ignore it. I know people don't want the hassle of it, but this is where the market's going, isn't it?
I think you've got. There's a few business plans.
Trends,
we've got to look at. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
But I will say that there's lots of right and there's lots of wrong. Yeah. So I think that you've got to set up your stall. Do you want to be broad? And if you want to be broad, get in with it. Go do the Just Eat, the Deliveroo, the lot. Do your kebabs, do pizzas, do everything. But we're also seeing a trend of new startups that are just doing fish and chips only.
Great.
And doing it well.
Yeah, some of these guys
Yeah.
down in the south coast and Somerset,
Yeah.
places like that, and they're just doing great fish and chips,
Yeah.
and they're mostly sort of restaurants, aren't they?
Yeah, some of them are restaurants, some of them are takeaways, yeah. But,
like scallop shell, people like that.
scallop shell, yeah.
And I think that seems to work in the south. And in the actually, it works anywhere, doesn't
I think,
it? As long as
again,
you
it's just a
concentrate-
different model, isn't it?
Yeah, you concentrate on your
and,
product.
and I think that as long as you concentrate on your product, have the sort of, is it tenacity, the sort of confidence to stick by it, just say I'm doing great fish and chips, a few great sides, a few homemade products, and that's where I want to be. But there's others, and that's fine. If you've got a business model that's slightly leaning away from that, and being more broad, that's fine too. I've seen fish and chip shops in Glasgow that do fish and chips, pizza, kebabs, pasta dishes, ice cream.
And that works for them.
That works for them, and that's fine. No one's saying, but I think it's identifying what works for you and then pushing it out.
Yeah.
I think that, for me, that's the important thing here. But again, you've got to have a good margin. If you haven't got a good margin, it's not worth doing. And I think it's something that I used to write about years ago in the trade magazine, and everyone used to laugh at me and say, oh yeah, look at you with your profit margin. I was like, well, okay, I'd rather have one of those than none. Because if you don't know where your margin is, you can't just look at the till at the end of the week and say, oh, it's been a bad week.
I agree.
And I think you wouldn't sell potatoes if they were at a loss, would you?
It's been known in the past, Steve.
No one would believe that. so if obviously with you guys, what implications does that have if you are selling less potatoes? Like, not just you guys, all potato business. If there's less going out on the vans, what do you see that the commodity is going to cost more?
It's going to cost more. So really, every supplier, in my opinion, that supplies the fish and chip sector, cost per unit has gone up.
Yeah.
Because you're not just buying less potatoes, you're buying less paper, salt, fish, whatever it may be. You're generally buying less of it. But their costs are pretty much the same. Okay, they're going to be able to make some, like we closed one of our depots, they're going to be able to make some saving, but they're not going to be able to make enough saving. And so they are going to have to increase their margin per unit. So that rather than putting on £1, they're going to need to put £1.10 on.
Yeah.
And so it's a vicious circle, really, because everyone needs to make a profit in the chain. Otherwise, it's not. No one's doing it for fun, are they?
No, of course not.
Some people are, but it's a tricky one, and it's like you say, it's each to their own. They've got to make their own decisions, but we just want people to be successful, and so we can be successful ourselves.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's the same with me. I want my customers to do the best they can do because that obviously benefits me too. It's like we all help each other in that respect. You know, if they sell more, we sell more.
Exactly.
It's the same sort of thing. One thing we don't like to talk a lot about on the podcast is Brexit, but essentially you're touching distribution, farming. There's a few different things going on here. So how does that affect you at the moment, or is it still too early to say?
That is the $1 million question, isn't it, Steve? I don't. It's very difficult for us to know what the answer to that is because we don't know what form Brexit's going to come in, do we? Mm-hmm. I don't think we're going to get a hard Brexit now.
No, it seems to be off the table now.
So it all depends on what kind of tariffs. I've got so lost in it now. If there's going to be tariffs on produce, which I think eventually there won't be.
Yeah, but there might be for a little bit of time.
Yeah. But we've got like a 2-year grace period, haven't we? So I think on food. I don't think you're going to see.
Is
tariffs.
this more from you sending potatoes abroad or bringing them over?
No, this is we bring them over.
Okay.
But let's say if the pound is strong, that's going to suppress prices in the UK.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be able to buy abroad for less and prevent farmers from putting the prices up too high. If the pound is weak, which looks less and less likely now, it's the reverse and prices will go up. But if there's tariffs involved, where we're having to pay a tariff to import, then that's going to be beneficial for the farmer and not for the end user because that's going to increase the cost of imported product, which is going to allow them to push their prices higher. So really that's, for me, the only knock-on effect. I think the only thing Brexit's done for us is just meant that the man on the street is spending slightly less.
Yeah, a bit of uncertainty there.
The uncertainty, and that's had an effect on our customers, which obviously had a knock-on effect on us.
Because I think a lot of people, like my dad's generation, would always say that fish and chips was recession-proof.
It is in a way.
But I don't think that's probably the case as much today.
No, I'd agree with that. And I think when recessions have actually, when they've started to bite, sales have dropped. So, for example, in 2000, the big crash in 2008, initially, the sales we were doing were just incredible. I mean, we were so busy, we couldn't believe it. And then people started losing their jobs in early 2009. And then it dips out, and it's never recovered.
I think the economy, though, to be fair, hasn't really recovered since that 2008 crash anyway, really, to some degree.
I mean, you see all these figures flying around. I'm pretty blinkered. I'm looking how it affects us. It's sad, but true. There seems to be a constant decline.
Yeah. Well, I think also regarding potatoes, I think there is
bad press on them.
Yeah, there is. And the fact that they fed nations for years.
Yeah.
I think now it's like we've got this first world problem where people are finicky. I eat less carbs than what most people. And you think I think that potatoes are probably being hit by. Not unhealthy, but people probably want to eat less carbs anyway. But it's a first world problem because if you take potatoes to Africa, they'll be happy to eat them. So we're very fussy in this country, whether it's veganism or whatever. We are very fussy in this country because it's first world problems, isn't it? So
yes, you're right. And veganism it should lend to people eating potatoes, but
you'd think,
But it's all these diets that have come in the past where they're carb free. And potatoes has been a hit, but really, nutritionally, that it's quite a good source of various things.
Yeah.
But
you need to bring out a low carb potato.
Well, or a low fat chip. Yeah.
So moving on to the end of the podcast, who would you say has been like a source of inspiration to you to some degree? I know it's a bit of a cheesy question, I know, but
I think. That's a good question. I daren't say my father. No.
He'd love that.
No, Dad has been. Yes, although he's certainly been an inspiration to me. I think the previous generations of Mitchells who have been doing various things. You're kind of picking up the baton and trying to run with it. So you don't want to be the generation that fails. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether that's inspiration or fear.
Well, fear of failure is a powerful thing.
And I think that definitely plays a role in my business life. But Dad's. I've learned a lot from Dad on how to deal with people and some work ethic, not quite as much as his. But I think he'll be very surprised if he hears this, and I say that he's my source of inspiration. He's also shown me how not to do things. Mm-hmm. So. But in other ways, he's shown me a lot of things that have helped my career.
In your sort of...
Or our career.
Well, yeah, and in your day-to-day, your brothers and all that, how do you sort of... Is the future-proof... Is future-proofing a thing? Like, do you think about the next generation? I'm
going to call you Stelios now. It's a tricky one. I think I have two daughters. Mm-hmm. David doesn't have any children at this stage. Angus has a son and a daughter. So if you break it down again, it starts to... I just don't know if there'll be too many people involved in it. Let's guess it's 3 now and it would be 4 then, so maybe it's not as bad as it seems. But it's a tricky one to decide where we're going to be going long term. We're certainly going to be around for a long time.
Oh, because you're still quite young.
Yeah,
we're
all Angus is in his late 30s, Dave and I are early 40s. So we're here for the foreseeable, but where it goes, I don't know.
No, exactly. It's still too early to say. Yeah. And but I think we'll end it there. I think we've covered quite a few topics. Yeah. And
thank you very much for having me.
No, thanks for doing it, Stuart.